4 years ago today, I did the thing that many aspiring game developers dream of doing. I quit my job and began full-time work on my indie passion project, Insignia. In the time since, I have not had a full-time job. I am not funded. I do not have a publisher, and I do not have a release date. But I'm still here. This is the tale of Insignia. To tell this story, I'm going to start by giving part of a talk that I gave at a college last year about my game dev story and who I am. And I think this is a pretty good summary of, how this even started. It all started in 2016 at PAX here in Australia. It's an amazing thing, right? It's a big celebration of what we are as gamers. I kind of like to think of it as a gaming mecca. No, not that kind of mecca, this kind of mecca. It's a place where we all come together and celebrate something that is so dear to us. And for many, it's kind of like a pilgrimage. For a long time, I had been romanticizing this idea, right, of being a game dev on my game dev journey in an indie way, right? Bringing a game that I've been working on so passionately to a space where I would, find some exposure and get feedback on the game and, steam towards release. However, in 2016, this was not me. I was here and I was attending a talk. It was called something like, "What would you have told yourself 5 years ago?" It was hosted by some very successful young Australian game developers. And I don't really remember much about what was said there because I was very envious at the time and I couldn't see past how frustrating it was for me to be there in the audience and not up on the stage, which is a kind of a weird thing to think, I guess. Like, I'm a passionate person and I probably have a little bit of an ego, and definitely on that day, something inside me snapped. I made a vow while I was sitting there that this project, this thing that I've been tinkering with, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to tinker with it. I'm going to work on it full time, and I'm going to come back here next year in 2017, and I'm going to be the person with the game, right? No more screwing around. I was in a situation where I wasn't happy with my life or my job, and I just wanted to change things. A year later, I was there. 2017, PAX Australia. I took my game Insignia. From there, strength to strength, I won a couple of local awards for the game, and I took the game to a couple of other places, a couple of other conventions in the following year in 2018. Of course, you know me as a streamer and a YouTube creator. I am probably one of the bigger Australian Twitch streamers who do game dev, and I'm also host of this channel here, which is growing. Okay, that all sounds really great and happy, but what's the real story here? My name's Adam, and I am a solo indie. I'm making this game called Insignia. I have an honours degree in design from the University of Sydney, and I am a Sydney native. I was born here and live here. For most of my young adult or adolescent life, I spent a lot of my time doing creative game-related stuff, or at least game-adjacent stuff. So I really love music, self-taught with guitar and keyboard. I practiced, many hours a week regularly throughout high school. I drew a lot of Kingdom Hearts and Zelda fan art on DeviantArt, as was the fashion. I made in-game avatars in Flash for an online community, so I was doing a bit of animation. I also created, with my friends, a Super Smash Bros. Brawl machinima. And so storytelling was something that we loved doing, and we always had, me and my mates, some kind of creative scheme we were coming up with. I learnt BASIC and VB in high school and some Java at uni. I was the host of a YouTube channel in 2011 about games, and I started entering Ludum Dare 48-hour game jams around 2013, 2014. So I did have a lot of experience with stuff relating to games, even though I don't have a game design background as far as my education. I don't have a degree in game design. I was doing a lot of creative stuff that you could see as, complementary to games throughout my young adult life. This was my YouTube channel. You can find it if you like. I'm not going to link it, but it's not very special. It's exactly what you'd expect from every small channel. Infrequent uploads, different content every week. I was just kind of screwing around, but it was a good base for what this channel has become. So I actually, when I was thinking about how I guess brand myself, when I tell people what I do and when I explain what Insignia is, I always talk about it as my first game. And it is the first game that I intend on publishing that I ever started working on. It's not the first game I've ever published because I've made a game since then that's a very small game based on a game that I made for Ludum Dare, but it is the first project that I ever stopped everything to work on, and it's ongoing. So these other projects, you know, they don't count for nothing, of course. All of these projects at one point in time were things that I was spending, you know, a lot of my time on. And even though I never finished any of them, they contribute to, you know, my experience and to who I am as a game developer. The question I guess you're asking is, why didn't I finish them, right? Why was I making all of this stuff and not finishing it? And I know that many of you are probably in the same situation. Maybe you have like a full-time thing that you do. Maybe you're a university student or you're a high school student or you have a job and you have a lot of ideas for games, but you can't really invest yourself in them enough to spend more than like 6 weeks or so on them. That was exactly where I was. I would bail on ideas when they stopped making me feel good. So I was a user experience designer for a few years. I really enjoyed that, but it wasn't my passion, you could say, because I had something burning in the back of my mind that was growing. And that thing is Insignia. Insignia started as an idea. Actually, it was a sketch that I drew while I was on my way home. This is George Street in Sydney. It no longer looks like this. It's actually now a tram line. But at the time, when I was starting my career, I had an hour-and-a-half bus ride home most nights in traffic. And so there was about 2 to 3 hours every day that I would sit on the bus. Thankfully, I don't get car sick. And I would just have time to think about stuff, sketch stuff, maybe code some little programming challenges that I had in my mind. And this is where Insignia was born. It started as a sketch, really, of the main character. I didn't have a name, so I just called the PNG guy.png. I still have this file on my computer somewhere. It is pretty close, actually, to what the main character looks like today. Not much has changed. The coat's gotten a little longer, the hair's gone red, that's about it. And this was sort of the impetus of the whole project. It has always been a project that is story-driven or story-bound. There are a lot of mechanical constraints and ideas that I wanted to explore that I'm still exploring in the game, but it started with an idea for a character. And that character grew into a world. Over the next few months, even though I was working full-time, you know, if I had a couple of minutes or, you know, half an hour here or there, I would sketch in a little notebook. And I would draw places this character would go, people he would meet, what's his story. And this went on for a year or so. And by the time I was at the point where I was pretty confident in the idea of actually making it as a game, I'd built out the whole synopsis for the story. So I had never used Unity before. I was actually quite familiar with Java and a library called Processing to do game-related stuff, and all of my games had been made in Processing before that. But I thought, you know, maybe Unity is the way to go. They had just released a 2D, you know, extension to Unity called Unity 2D, and that's now part of the engine. And so I fired up Unity and made this. This was the first thing that I made. It was using the default character controller. It was using some crappy art that I created. I wasn't super happy with it, but this is what I had. Between 2014, when I first created this project, and 2016, I was not working on the project actively. I had created this early project. I wasn't super happy with the results. I had other stuff in mind, and I just wasn't really confident in Unity as a platform for me to make the game on. So I tried a few different engines, and by the time I came back to the project seriously in 2016, Unity was at a place where I was a bit more comfortable with it, and I knew more about it. And by PAX 2017, this is what I had. This is what the game looked like. Many of these graphics are still in the game. I had built a dialogue system, I had platforming, I had items that you could pick up. There was a combat system. I cobbled together this intro on the plane on the way there, just to give people a bit of backstory on what the hell the story was about. And people liked it so much that I actually embellished it, and it's in the game today with graphics and stuff like that. You couldn't go into the first town. That wasn't done yet. All you could do was run around in this first environment and the following dungeon, and there was a boss fight at the end. So this really today isn't something that I would be super proud of, because it's missing a lot of the things that you would expect in a game of this scale. My technical skills weren't quite there. A lot of it was really rushed. The quality is all over the place. But at the time, I was quite proud of it. It was something that I felt confident that I could shape into the game that it eventually would become, or will maybe become. The experience on the show floor was really positive. People say nice things very, very freely. And the booth was busy for most of the weekend. I was basically there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. all day for 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It felt like a real win, actually. It felt really good at the end of it. On the last day, which was the Sunday, at around 6 p.m., the crowds began to thin and people began to go home. And the last few players were, having their fun with the game. And I had a chat with a couple of them before leaving. This is me, this is my selfie. As I left the show on the last day before returning home from Melbourne to Sydney. And I felt pretty happy with myself. But not really, right? There was something in my eyes that gave away my melancholy. The reason I was so conflicted was because even though I was very proud of the project and my work, and I felt like it was a real achievement to get to where I was, within that short period of time. And even though the positive feedback was unanimous, right? Everyone said such nice things about it. It only took one person on the last day to say something that was honest, yet critical, to really, really cut me to the core. Because they said things that I could see and that I felt that nobody else would say. They said the game looked empty and a little bit lifeless. They said they understood what I was trying to do, but it just wasn't doing it for them yet. And they said it in such a way that was kind of disappointed, right? They knew what I was going for, and they found it difficult to be honest, but they were honest nonetheless. And this really hit me hard. And the next year, it basically shaped the entire way that I approached the game. Probably in a negative way, to be honest, because insecurity was a huge factor behind most of my design decisions in 2018. Nonetheless, rather than run away from this negative feedback or give up on the project or anything like that, I did something different. I turned to Twitch. This was the first live stream that I ever hosted. This is me with a very poor setup here. But something cool happened. The more I worked on the game, the more I streamed, the more people showed up. Over time, the viewership grew. This is quite modest. It's not at a scale that's that impressive, and many channels, young channels, sit at this level. Within the first 6 months, I had 20 average viewers. Sometimes the feedback was positive. Sometimes the feedback was negative. Sometimes it was personal. Sometimes people would say mean things to me, and that still happens. But there was something about me that was different. I cared enough about Insignia to embrace the failure. Unlike all those other projects, this was something that was so close to me because I was emotionally committed to it. The failures of the project were my failures, and rather than run away from those, it was something that I wanted to confront and to improve. And I did. There was a pattern. First, I would do something. Someone would say, it's bad. I would get defensive. I would criticize their criticism. But secretly, I would be listening. I would try again, and the thing would be better. That exposure to failure and confrontation of it really defined this whole dev process and my design process as a developer. An example would be this house here, this building. The building looks okay. There's nothing technically wrong with it other than its lack of character. It's a little bit flat. I got some feedback from someone on stream who was kind enough to actually draw over the stuff that I was doing and explain things to me that I should have known, but that I couldn't see at the time. And they also drew a cabbage on my head. Thank you, Creature Cloud. And this was, the updated result. Looks much better. Even today, I would look at this and say, oh, I could fix this in a number of different places. But it's an improvement on where it was, which is the important thing. And this continued in every aspect of the game, and particularly in my pixel art from 2017 to 2019. I improved because I was doing it every day and because I was not afraid to face the feedback. Even if I was defensive in person, it was something that I was digesting and I cared about. This crossed the entire dev process. This was from the sprites, the character designs, the mechanics, everything. Even as I was streaming the game and as I was streaming development, I would also take the game to local meetups and get feedback from other developers, even in areas that were really embarrassing for me, like UX, something that I had done professionally for multiple years. I still made mistakes on, and I still got feedback that was painfully obvious when having players experience the game. Players would show the flaws in the design merely by not understanding what to do. And, it was up to me, of course, to fix that and to confront that. And eventually, I think my imposter syndrome as a developer, I've always thought of myself as someone who is trying to be a game developer, who's not one yet. But my experience as I've been doing this has constantly been, being part of a community. It's not about the games you release. It's about the time you spend, the people you meet, the feedback you give and the feedback you receive, and how that, helps the entire community, including your own game, move forward. By 2020, my game looked like this. Insignia is a side-scrolling action-adventure game. It is a love letter to the games that I grew up playing, and also a personal expression of a story that I wish to tell. It has unique mechanics, it has familiar mechanics, it has hopefully a really gripping story with great boss fights, enemies, items to pick up, places to explore, just a small little world that I've created that I hope you enjoy playing in. The game is yet unreleased. I work on this game every day, and every day I add new things to the game, but it's such a big project that it's something that I haven't been really confident sharing with you guys for a long time, even though it's the thing that I work on every single day. I am totally conscious of people's expectations. I am fully aware of deadlines and how disappointing it can be to be following a project that never seems to be getting off the ground, and maybe even the fear that it will never get off the ground. That said, I'm really happy with where the systems are at right now, whether it's the cutscene engine and the dialogue system. The combat is feeling really, really sharp. There are, at this stage, a few things that I'm tweaking with end game mechanics before adding the rest of the story content to the game. There is so much pixel art to be done. All in all, the game's got a lot left. And as I've been finding myself in a position here on YouTube to be given such a privilege to share what I've learned with you in pixel art and in game dev, it's becoming a greater and greater sense of tension for me to think of new things to share that aren't related to this project, because I work on this project every day, and the content that I create for YouTube is almost always not related to this, right? It's fresh content that I produce on the weekend. And so I think the whole purpose of this video is to introduce you to Insignia. I want to be producing more devlogs, and I want to be producing more tutorials for you guys, but that's stuff that is related to the game, or at least uses the game as an example to share with you some of those things that I've learned. I really enjoy teaching you guys pixel art fundamental stuff, but I also really want you to know what I'm working on. Since 2017, I've been acutely aware of the fact that I can't actually do this forever without a publisher or without some kind of funding. And it's been my dream for a long time to actually be able to fund what I do with the thing that I do, right? Having the game fund itself through its development and through the content that I create and sharing that process. And I think finally, literally 4 years after starting, I may actually be at that point. The Twitch stream, this YouTube channel, the Patreon, they're all growing at a rate that I'm very happy with and very grateful for. So thank you so much. And so I think being such a momentous time in the game's life cycle and in my journey as a developer, given that we crossed 10,000 follows on Twitch just yesterday and 30,000 here on YouTube this week, I think it's the perfect time to introduce you to the project and to start making more content about it. So this is Insignia. That is the first indie tale. And see you around. Hey pal, thanks for watching. And thanks most especially to the patrons and Twitch subs who support this channel and my game dev project Insignia. To find out more, click the links in the description below. And if you like this video, tell YouTube by clicking the like button, and then YouTube will tell me, and then I'll make more videos. That's nice. Thanks again, and until next time.